Murray. I'm the Training Partnerships Manager for Thornfields, which is part of First Practice Management Group. So I'd like to welcome you today to the webinar that our consultant Heather Cook is going to deliver on managing friendships in the workplace. So just before we start, I'll go through a little bit of housekeeping. The session is being recorded. Once we've finished the session, we will edit it and upload it to our YouTube channel, which is the FPM channel. And for anybody who has to leave early or who was unable to attend today, you can view it for free on there. If you do have any questions, if you can just submit them into the chat on Teams during the session, we'll answer them if it's appropriate at that time, but if not, we'll have a question and answer session at the end, and obviously we can just go through them then. If you do have any thoughts or experiences that you'd like to share on what's being covered, or you've got anything that's relevant to the session today, then please feel free to join in and add that in as well. And obviously Heather's here to answer any questions. At the end of the session, we will ask for your feedback just to get your thoughts on how you felt the session went, and also you can give feedback on anything else that you'd like to see on a webinar in future. So I'll stick that link into the chat as we go. So I'm going to hand you over to Heather now, and she's going to take it from here. So thank you very much, Heather. Off you go.
Okay, thanks, Helen. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Heather. I'm working with First Practice Management today. I'm a consultant with First Practice Management. Part of my remit does include HR and how we work together, but I work with lots of doctors' surgeries and lots of businesses in relation to the topic that we're going to talk about today, which is about how we actually work with our friendships and personal relationships in the workplace. So we'll start on our first slide, going forward with the content. So what is this workshop about? The implications of friendships within the workplace and the professional boundaries of a manager and their team members. And we're going to talk about what those boundaries mean. And we often ask when we employ anybody, how would you manage boundaries with relationships in the workplace? So hopefully this webinar might give you a little bit of guidance of how you would actually do that, because it's part of your managerial process that it will be your responsibility as a manager to do that. So it should help you to understand why boundaries are important and how personal relationships have an impact on others. And we look at where your loyalties must lie as a manager and how to remain fair, objective, and basically a fair process, ensuring you retain the credibility, trust and respect as a manager. We're also going to talk about how you actually manage emotions, because it's quite an emotional topic if you're involved in relationships within the workplace, the well-being of your team members and the value of those colleague relationships, whether it's your relationship with one specific person, whether it's two people that are friends in the workplace, or, as we often find, familial relationships is when you've got relationships of family members within the workplace. So on to the next slide. The workplace friendships, their value and implications. So why should we set clear boundaries and expectations? Do remember to ask Helen any questions in the chat box as we go through. We do like to get questions and anything that you've got that might be a scenario you want us to talk through as well. So we're looking to why we need the clear boundaries for our own and our team and their own expectations. It's not just about yours, it's about theirs and what impact it has on all of you if you've got these relationships in the workplace. We'll ask where our loyalties lie. Whose loyalties if this relates to team members? This is an important question. Where do your loyalties lie? With your colleague, with your team, or with your friendship, or with your relation? We'll talk about conflict of interest. And your loyalties could create a conflict of interest. We often hear about managing conflict, but this is just a little different. It's about conflict of interest in relation to management and in relation to your loyalties and where they lie. So how are we going to be rational, fair and objective about this? If we have workplace relationships or familial relationships within the workplace, and familiar relationships, I will reiterate, they are more common than we expect in our industries, and be quite challenging for you as a fair manager and both parties and from the rest of the team. And also if you have to manage somebody who is in the familial relationship that is also a team leader, that also manages somebody else and maybe manages their own family member, which is things that we do occasionally come across. So would we need to compromise? And if so, how would this be appropriate? And the responsibility we have in managing the relationship and what compromise would do to that relationship. Bearing in mind, we're wanting to keep harmony in the workplace. We're not wanting conflict. So we need to make sure we've got a strong management ethic in the workplace. And how important is it to be liked? And this is different to being respected. We all like to be liked, I think. Most would like to believe that we are liked, but we carry responsibility. So we'd also like to be respected. We don't get given respect, we have to earn it. And then we look at PowerPoint versus being supportive. These two words have very different meanings, and we need to know how they are perceived in the workplace. So we're going to go through each of these elements individually and talk about them in a little bit more detail. So the next slide will talk to us about our boundaries. So clear boundaries and expectations in relation to our workplace friendships. Is the relationship with yourself or between two colleagues? We need to set the clear boundaries and expectations for both parties. So you need to specify your role, and these are some tips to help you. If you're in that position as a manager, how do you set those relationship boundaries? It's really challenging. There is a simple way of doing it, and this might be something that would help you. When you talk to your friend, it might be helpful to say, speaking as your manager or speaking as your friend. Clarify in what concept and content of the conversation that you're talking about, and it should simplify and clarify your role. If they then ask you, what do you mean? You are my friend and you are my manager. No, in this instance, you need to really clarify which role you're speaking on behalf of. If you can't determine that, then you need to take a step back and rethink about how you're actually going to have the conversation. It is really important there are defined boundaries. So what happens when your friend or two friends in the workplace aren't adhering to your workplace boundaries? What do we do then? We can't ignore this. It is important for you to stay in your managerial role and perhaps say to them, can you or can we have a chat about this outside of the workplace, please? And keep the boundaries in place. So if your team or your colleague or your friend is wanting to talk to you about something that isn't work related, and you hear somebody talking like that, then you may want to intervene and saying, can I just stop you there, please? This is about your personal relationship. Could you actually take this outside of the workplace, if you don't mind, please, and maybe have this chat in a break? We can be very pleasant about this. It doesn't have to be formal, but you need to build that resilience and confidence to allow you as a manager to have these conversations. So rule of thumb, make personal plans in personal time. Don't let the relationship impact on others, making them feel uncomfortable. For example, making arrangements for a night out, which could show exclusion to some of them and make them feel uncomfortable. Think about the words that you use if you've got a friendship within your workplace and how it makes others feel when you're having conversations with them if it isn't about work. So just be mindful, we don't want to show exclusion. We don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. We don't want to make it that we've got a group of people that we meet outside of work and they're not included. So just think about your role as a manager and how you have these conversations. Please do avoid discussing work outside of the workplace. it's unprofessional, and the majority of us do work in a confidential industry. So it is deemed very inappropriate to talk about the workplace outside of work. So please do avoid temptation and say to your friend that it is inappropriate if you're talking about work. We have strict confidential guidelines in a lot of our industries. So please do stress to your friend it is inappropriate and that you don't want to continue the conversation outside of the workplace, and remind them that the boundaries in there and why they are there. You might get laughed at. Stand your ground. This is about you as a manager, and say that I'm not at work today. Let's not talk about work, please. Equally, do not discuss personal issues outside of work unless it's impacting on somebody's performance. Personal issues should be outside of working time, but if your conversation is personal because of workplace performance, then please do remember the phrase, speaking as your manager. It's really important to keep the boundaries in place. We do ask at interview, when we're interviewing managers, how do you keep the boundaries between friendships and business relationships? It is a really important question. And never ever vent to a friend who is a direct report about work or colleagues. It is important that the friendship remains outside of the workplace. Don't cross that boundary when you're outside of the workplace. And please don't talk about colleagues outside of the workplace, and discourage your friendship to talk about it as well. It will eventually, if it's new to you, it will eventually become a pattern that you will have things in your mind that you will be able to say. But it is important that you get used to how you work, especially if it is one of your friends in the workplace. It is important that you get used to using these phrases, and it will become more comfortable and you will become more professional. So moving on to the next slide, we're going to talk about the relationships in the workplace and where our loyalties lie. So relationships in the workplace can be very hard on friendship, and fallouts do happen. If you have the opportunity and choose a leadership role, loyalty to the workplace has to come first. It has to come before the loyalty to your friendship. And this can be really challenging. You need to get this into your mindset, the defined boundaries yourself, when you're looking at loyalty in the workplace. So for example, how would your friend cope if you had a problem with their work ethic? They weren't doing something that they should be doing. Or if you need to call your friend into a disciplinary meeting. If you're a manager, these challenges will happen if your friendship is moving outside of boundaries or they're not working appropriately within the workplace. We would need you to manage this scenario as you would any other team member. We don't have favoritism. We manage every team member the same way. We run a fair process in relation to HR. So remember, speaking as your manager in this instance, the problems would need to be addressed. And hopefully they don't expect the boundaries to be pushed out for them, as this would show favour and gain again and be unprofessional. So could you still have a night out with your friend with them or be in each other's homes? Would you engage in alcohol? Too much alcohol? We've got to think of all these considerations and how you keep yourself and your mindset as a manager. And if you do want to let your hair down, you have to totally take away yourself and your personality from the workplace. So serious questions to ask yourself if you're a manager. Misplaced loyalties can cause conflict with your responsibilities, and these are often and will be questioned by others. And by others, I don't just mean your colleagues in the workplace. It could be your managers, your own managers. They will see how you are responding. We do get some people in the workplace that disclose the relationship. They will disclose they've got a familial relationship at the point of employment, or if they've got a friendship relationship at the point of employment. It is important that we do clarify these. But do bear in mind that means that we are measured against our principles as a manager. So moving on to the next slide, let's look at your responsibilities as a manager, and a gentle reminder to please use the chat box for any questions you may have, please. It is a gentle reminder because you have an opportunity today to ask any questions you wish, and you've got ears with you today that may be able to help you. If you want to talk about something a little bit more private and wait to the end, then please do so. That's fine as well. So our next slide is we're going to talk about the conflict of interest and what this means. The conflict of interest occurs when an individual becomes unreliable because of clash between personal interests and professional duties or relationships. For example, your friend tries to convince you that they deserve a promotion or a pay rise. That's a challenge. How do you manage a friend coming to you about a promotion or a pay rise? Or they could ask you to cover up a mistake, which may have a professional ramification. These are serious issues. Do they deserve a promotion? Do they deserve a pay rise? How does it impact on others? We run a fair process. You need to have the confidence to explain this to your friend. If they try to convince you to cover something up, and when I say a professional ramification, it could be a significant event, it could be something quite serious. What would you do in that instance? You need to have the chat as a manager, not as a friend. So when such a situation arises, the party with a conflict of interest is usually asked to remove themselves or can be legally required to recuse themselves if it's in relation to an HR or a clinical issue. So we ask them to give us some information if it's something that we need to actually make some managerial changes. But what happens if they don't? What happens if they don't recuse themselves from something that you know that you have to manage and you don't want their influence? Always remember you are a manager and your loyalty lies to your business. Their or your own vested interests may raise a question of whether their interests, actions, judgments, or decision making can be unbiased. When you're actually managing in your role as a manager, you need to be unbiased. We don't act in a favouriteist way. Conflicts of interest may have the legal ramifications, and I keep saying this because we do come across it, especially if there is a significant event which could possibly be covered up, and more importantly, later found. We are governed by compliance, and things do get found. We can't just sweep things under the carpet, especially in relation to significant events. They need to be managed, and they need to be managed appropriately. So you need to have the confidence to talk to your friend about your relationship, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with the reason that you're talking to them about business. So another example, as a manager, you may need to manage a relationship between, say, two partners, or a senior manager and a staff member. People develop relationships in the workplace. And if you are the practice manager or a business manager, it's your responsibility to make sure they flow efficiently and effectively through the workplace in that relationship without having any conflict, especially if their loyalties are for each other and not the practice or business they work in. And we do come across this and we have to manage it. It's very challenging when you're dealing with the business owners, and that could be directors or partners. And we do come across in our lines of work people that are married. We need to have the confidence to say how their relationship affects others in the workplace. And we need to have the confidence to actually mentor through that relationship and that process if we need to. So a conflict of interest can lead to legal ramifications as well as job loss or adverse business reputation. And there are examples I can give you that can lead to business reputation where there has been a conflict in relation to an internal relationship through two senior people that were ignoring some of the problems they were incurring, and it actually got reported outside of the workplace. So it really is important that we know about legal ramifications. So I think you can see where this journey's gone from just starting this webinar of where it's led to already, in the fact this is not just about friendships, it's about the business itself and our loyalty to the business, the reputation, the adverse, and maybe job loss, which we don't want. We don't want to have that. So a suggestion to try to avoid this would be that they remove themselves from all decisions that could affect the company. However, this may not be simple, especially if it involves the partners. I've been in meetings wherever I've asked a partner or a senior member to remove themselves from the meeting. Excuse yourself, please, because we want to talk about your friend or your relationship. And because we have to, we can't ignore these. And if it's something that is having an impact on the business or on your practice, it has to be something that you've got the confidence to say, please, can you recuse yourself from this meeting because we need to have a private conversation. Just give us 15 minutes and please come back in then. But you can't ignore these conversations. So on our next slide, we're going to talk about whilst we are at work. So how do we manage ourselves being rational, fair and objective in the workplace in relation to friendships? We avoid the favoritism. We earn respect and credibility, and we give respect and credibility. We are objective and we are fair. We listen. It's really important. This is a really important slide to level and balance the relationship of all of the relationships within our workplace. So it's important to treat your friend the same as you would anyone else in your team. Friendship can push the boundaries, and if we aren't careful, can be seen as given favoritism, special treatment, protection from a negative outcome. Your team members are not blind. Equally, the people that you work with are not either. You don't want a complaint against yourself. Because you're in a managerial position doesn't make you immune from other people complaining against you. So do ensure that you are rational, fair and objective. You will lose respect and credibility as a manager if you favour your friend and leave yourself open to personal criticism from the management above you, questioning your own ability as a manager. We don't want to end up as managers in our own disciplinary process. And it could happen if people make the complaints against us in relation to how we're actually managing friendships in the workplace. You could also lose respect and credibility from the team. And if you don't manage other personal relationships in the workplace, you will also lose that respect and credibility within the workplace. You will need to be diplomatic and clarify how important it is to be objective and fair in your decisions as a manager, and remind others about this too. Remind yourself how you should behave. Ask yourself, would you behave in the same way or make the same decision if you didn't have a personal history with this individual? The other one is we do get a lot of development within our businesses. So we need to look objectively at how we actually work with people when we're actually going through process to actually recruit and bring people along their journey in relation to their own journey within the workplace. So just be mindful, rational, fair and objective is across all of the boards in how we actually work within the workplace. So on to the next slide, compromise and responsibility. Respect and loyalty and acting appropriately. So how do we define these as both hold value and address different human needs? We are human beings. It's not just about documentation and handbooks. We are beings with human needs. And as a friend and or as a manager, we all do in the workplace. So we need to define and clarify our posts within the workplace and our friendships and relationships within the workplace. So respect in leadership is important. However, some managers struggle because they want their team to like them. And at the same time, especially if friendship is involved. We sometimes find this when there is an internal promotion. There's nothing wrong with wanting people to like you. There's nothing wrong with people saying, Heather's kind, we like Heather. It's nice, it's a good feeling. However, if your actions cause you personally to take actions that can undermine the respect people have for your leadership position, then you've got to compromise, or you haven't compromised. It's much more fun to be in an environment where people like and enjoy working with you, but they still need to respect the decisions you make and why you make them. And as I said earlier, you earn respect, you are not given it. So when a team has respect for their manager, they feel comfortable that they're on the right track and that they are in good hands. They will feel that there is no compromise, that can come to you with anything, even if it's about your friend. This has a knock-on effect on performance as team members are self-assured and act without hesitation. It might be that you encourage people to talk about others if there's a problem, and we keep an open-minded place in the workplace. I don't mean that in the case of talking about them in a negative way, but in positive situations. So you can talk about other people's friendships and relationships, and when you have appraisals with people, you can actually praise them for the way they manage their relationship within the workplace. So when you step into management, it's important that both parties work within the boundaries set. You don't want to be regarded as a bad boss or seen to be creating an unpleasant work environment. This might mean you look the other way when someone behaves badly, or perhaps avoid having a direct, difficult conversation about a difficult issue. You may take on more work yourself because you want to avoid putting pressure on your team. That is not the answer or the solution. Managers who strive to be liked often focus on the easy parts of leadership. They give people praise and spend time helping them to develop, but they don't do the hard work of confronting bad behaviour or performance. And that is where your team can lose the respect for you, which you have tried so hard to earn. Earn their respect, and they hopefully will like you for it. It is challenging when you step into a managerial role. It is challenging, but we need to not let those boundaries go and try not to compromise. You've got responsibility. You've earned the respect. You've got the loyalty of your team. Act appropriately when somebody gives you something that's a challenge, and don't let personal issues and friendships encroach on that. So on to the next slide. Liked versus respect. We just talked a little bit about this, about being a manager. Does this mean that you are liked versus respected? How does that work in your favour? The respect you receive in leadership comes across the board from all parties. The respect isn't just about your team. It's about the partners who work with you. It's what we call upwards. It's upwards management as well as downwards management. So the respect in leadership does have a strong versus against being liked. And your managers above you will want you to be respected. Yes, they will want your team to like you, but they will want to know that you're managing the challenges. So it is important that you actually define those boundaries and you are aware of how your peers above you feel about you and that they do respect you. And you yourself will have an appraisal, and it's a time for yourself to ask those questions. Ask them if they can find out. We do 360-degree appraisals about how your team feel about you, whether you're liked, whether you're respected. There's nothing wrong with those. If they come in negatively, then it means we've got someone who can manage. And if they come in positively, then we've got a big smile. So liked versus respected, just bear in mind about what you feel. Sometimes it's the easy route to be liked. We find it's less challenging, but being respected earns you the right to be a manager. So moving on to our almost final slide, we're going to talk about power versus support. So power and control. Power, that's a big word. Expectations, support and well-being. So being a manager, does this mean you have power and control? No, it doesn't. It means you are responsible for unbiased leadership and supporting the success of every individual on your team. We do get some people that get the role of a manager and think that they're powerful, but it's more important that you are responsible for unbiased leadership within your team. You will value colleague relationships and are aware of well-being and emotions. Again, this is really important that you have that observation, that you have that awareness of well-being. So how do we achieve this? We achieve it by setting clear expectations, which prevents confrontation and kickback. And being clear to start with should prevent conflict. So do set out whether you are speaking as a manager or whether you are speaking as a friend. Clear to start out with should prevent conflict, enable you to build a rapport and trust with all of your team members. It is important that you reinforce the boundaries, especially with your own friendship, and don't ignore problems or wait for another team member to complain about your friendship. You need to take the responsibility in your managerial role to manage your relationship, your friendship relationship, yourself. So do be prepared for challenging conversations in relation to friendships in the workplace to ensure that you are there to support all of your team members, not just your friend. Okay. Have you got any questions? We've been asking this through a few of the slides. Has anybody got any questions that they would like to ask, or have you got any in the chat, Helen?
Yeah, I've got a couple that people sent through earlier. So the first one was, would it be advisable to ask a friend to attend disciplinary as a note taker?
That's a good question. No, it wouldn't. You should be unbiased. The notes that you take down should be unbiased. The note taker should be impartial.
Okay, thank you. Right, couple more I've got here, Heather. So how best can I manage the transition from being part of a team to managing that same team? So how do I become approachable but also establish the boundaries? How do you make the transition?
Okay, this is a long answer. First of all, you need to make sure you've got the leadership training, to make sure that you've gone through that training. And I know there's a lot out there, but leadership is really important. I do see an awful lot of workplaces where people are given a role as a manager because they've been there the longest. And that doesn't always work. And what you don't want is to say, yeah, I've got the managerial role, and then get it wrong. So it is important. It's a learning curve to step from one role into the other, but you need to make it clear to your team that you don't want to spoil the relationship you've got at the moment, but you do need to take a step to one side and then go upwards. But that leadership training should help you to actually manage that process.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I've got one more here. Sorry, two more. So how would I respond when a friend says you've changed, which is, they've interpreted as a criticism? How would you respond to that?
I would ask them, is that a change for the better or for the worse? I would also ask them, have I changed in the workplace or outside of the workplace? And then I would reflect back to what we've just been talking about. And if it's in the workplace, you would have a conversation with them privately and ask them what they felt the impact of that change had been. And if it's outside of the workplace, that the friendship relationship has changed, then you'd have that conversation outside of the workplace and say, actually, if it's about our friendship, and I do value our friendship, can we have a chat about it this evening? Or, you talk about it at a different time, but outside of the workplace.
Okay, so what would I do if I see a fellow manager favouring their friends in how they manage the team?
Oh dear. Okay. Common questions. A fellow manager, it needs to be addressed. It does need to be addressed. Are they a sideways manager or an upwards manager? If they are a sideways manager, then you need to take that to the one that's above and maybe have a chat, both of you as managers, the fact that you feel a little bit uncomfortable, and then hopefully the person above will be managing you as a little bit of conflict with your friend. So you would have a mentoring situation where you learn from each other, and hopefully there's somebody impartial above you to actually listen to both sides and find out where you could actually make improvements.
Thank you, Heather. Okay, somebody's asked in the chat, how do you deal with back chat from a friend or a team member in front of the whole team?
You take them to one side. You take them, if anybody's back chatting to you, just say, I don't think this is the time or place to have this conversation. If you want a private chat, I'm just going to pop back to my office, or I'll be outside or whatever, but take it away. Take it away from the environment. I think we've all been there as managers. I've walked into a place with 3 people throwing information into my face, and I've walked in and I've just said, I don't think it's appropriate at the moment. Have a think about what you want to say to me, and either all come to me with a cohesive way forward of what you want to say, or come to me as individually and I'll talk to you all.
Thank you. So there hasn't been any more questions come through. Would anybody like to share anything that they've experienced, either as a manager or as the friend of the manager? Or here's one, sorry. So I have a family member within the workplace. I would be responsible for their annual appraisal and have recused myself from doing this purely due to being a family member. However, I feel that I could do this unbiased. Would you always avoid this?
That is another good question. It might be that you want somebody else in that appraisal with you. It depends on what position that person holds within the workplace. It is better that you are impartial. And whilst you might think you can do it unbiased, maybe it's better that you don't, because it's what other people feel, especially if it leads to training needs or it leads to promotion or further development. It might cause, it might seem that you haven't been impartial. So I think whilst we all might feel we can be unbiased, how is that perceived by others? And I would recuse myself if it was myself and ask somebody else to do that appraisal. We always do pre-appraisal forms anyway, or hopefully you do. If we do appraisal form, we know that it might be that if you're that line manager, that you share that with a person and give your comments about what you want said in the appraisal. So, or you might have somebody else that's doing that appraisal with you and you have them in with you as an impartial observer. So I wouldn't do it on my own now.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for that question, Kerry, and Alison as well. So has anybody got anything that they'd like to share or any other questions to ask? Or Heather, have you got any examples of when you might have experienced something like this, a bit like what you've just said?
I can give you an example that is unpleasant that I've had to deal with, and it was in relation to, we've got another question, we've got Alison.
Yeah, Alison, so how would we deal with the fallouts of workplace friendships?
Well, it's interesting actually, because your loyalty lies to the business, and a fallout outside of the workplace is for you to manage outside of the workplace. Within the workplace, it's for the manager to manage it, and you treat that person as an employee. It's difficult. It is difficult. It is challenging, but we have to put that hat on. We have to have the managerial hat on to say that I am a manager and have that conversation with that person. So it's not what you wanted. It's not the outcome you wanted. If you're going to work together, they have to respect the fact that you are, or they will hopefully have respect for the fact that you are a manager when you're in the workplace. And then any relationship issues that you've got outside of the workplace would be a conversation away from work.
I can imagine that's tricky to deal with. Okay, so I've got a couple more come through. I have a relative who would be ideal for a vacancy we have, but how do I manage that process in the most unbiased way?
Good question. Again, I keep saying that. I'll have to stop saying good question.
Question.
When you're actually recruiting, you run an unbiased process, and you will have some sort of mechanism to actually have an advert out there, have somebody apply properly. And if you're looking and you think that there might be a good person to work within your job, your place of work, then you would ask them to apply as anybody else would, and they would be assessed the same way anybody else would. And then you would talk openly. If hopefully it's not just yourself that's doing the interviews, and you would talk openly if your relative is the one that you want to appoint. You would have an open conversation to say, we've been fair, we've been objective in this, we've gone through the full process, but I will open full disclosure, the new person that's joining us is a relative of mine and they're in this post, but there won't be just you that note. The people around you, the people that you work for will know that the appointment is made to somebody who you have a familiar relationship with. But make sure the interview process is fair and everybody has had an opportunity to apply.
Yeah. Okay, I've got another one. So what would I do if my friends at work are getting out of hand at the Christmas party? Can I turn a blind eye to Christmas outside of work?
No, it's a difficult one, and this is where your boundaries kick in, because it's outside of the workplace, but is it a works party?
Yeah.
And if it's a works party, you are responsible as a manager for making sure that party is fine. I have to say, I've been in management over 30 years. I never drink alcohol at a Christmas party. I have my own boundaries in place. I love to watch everybody else enjoying themselves. I might have a glass of wine. I love to watch everybody else enjoying them. In fact, I want to ensure everybody else enjoys themselves, but I don't want to be part of that enjoyment because I might end up having to resolve something that's happened at the Christmas party, or something might bleed into the workplace when we get back to work that is not very pleasant that I've got to manage. But everybody's individual on how they manage outside of the workplace. I'm quite specific. I am quite specific when I'm actually in out of work party mode sort of thing. I like to watch people enjoy themselves.
Good answer, Heather. Very good answer. Okay, so has anybody else got any questions? Still got quite a lot of people on the call. So if anybody has got anything they'd like to share, just give it a minute or two.
I'm just going to go through a scenario with you, Helen, whilst we're on screen, while we're waiting to see anybody else wants to ask.
Okay, thank you.
I've worked with many doctors, surgeries and practices and businesses in relation to HR issues. And one that was challenging was in relation to a business owner who had a relationship with one of the employees. And the employee, unfortunately, was misbehaving. So we've got a misbehaviour in the workplace that's been ignored by the business owners because of this relationship. It takes a long time to sort these things out. We can't ignore it. This has taken me probably about 8 months to try to resolve on this one specific instance. You have to be forthright. You have to say it's inappropriate. We don't have to consider the feelings of the business owner and the employee. We have to do what's right for the business. And this has been very, very difficult because the business owner doesn't want to step aside. They don't want to step away from any of the conversations. They want to be included. And then they're very defensive. And then they actually say to the employee outside of the workplace what's been said about them. So they can be really challenging. And in this instance, I'm a third party that's been brought in to manage this situation. So there's lots of other examples. This is quite extreme and it's quite rare. But what I'm saying is costly, it's timely, it's sensitive, it's caused disharmony. We're using disciplinaries, we're using external advice, it's legal, there is a clinical aspect to it. Yeah. There is something in relation to a clinical aspect that's not been brought to the table, but I know about it. A colleague has brought it to the table. So there can be so complex relationships within the workplace. So do please mind that if you are the manager, you're the one, if you can't manage it yourself, there are people outside the workplace to get help, and do take that help. It really is important that you do get that help. There's lots of places that can help you in relation to HR, and do it in confidence. Yeah. There are people out there who will support you in confidence.
Yeah. Just thinking about first practice management, we'll have policies around behaviour and conduct in the workplace. They'll probably include personal relationships as well. But would you recommend that that's something that the practice has, or would you just base it on an individual kind of relationships as and when and if they happen in the workplace?
No, I'm a firm believer of introducing policy as new policies are needed. Yeah. And if anybody hasn't got a policy in relation to a difficult situation, then maybe speak to somebody who can advise you to create that policy. I'm a big believer of expanding your employment handbook to cover all aspects. And if you haven't got it in at the moment, maybe it's something you want to consider. But the employment handbook should be your behavioural Bible, basically, in your workplace.
So if anybody on this call is a member of First Practice Management and uses FPM Core, then there will be a policy in there that you can download and adapt for your practice. And obviously with that comes HR advice, which is always there if you do need any advice and guidance on that as well. So Alison has written in the chat, what would that cover? So what would a policy, I'm assuming you mean the policy, Alison? What kind of things would that cover?
It's about behaviour. It would cover
conduct.
It would be the conduct and the behaviour, of the workplace. You may already have a policy about behaviour and harassment, things like that in the workplace. You might have something that you can adapt to make it fit as an extension or an addendum of that policy. But it would cover any aspect that you think could be a risk. So basically, if you're bringing somebody into the workplace that is a friend, or you've got familiar relationships, then maybe risk assess how that's going to have an impact on the workplace.
Yeah. As part of Thornfields as well, we do have some workshops that can help you. So you did mention leadership in the beginning, Heather. We've got a course called the ILM, Managing People with Confidence, and I actually did that myself when I was in a practice manager and made that transition from being one of the team to the assistant practice manager. It's a tricky move, and it did obviously help me with that. So we've got that first of all. We've also got another workshop called Workplace Professionalism, and it looks at behaviours and a lot of things to do with patients and how you work with them, but how you work as a team, how you conduct yourself as part of a team and in the workplace as well. And obviously we've got our consultancy service as well, which Heather is one of our experienced consultants. So if you do have any tricky situations or you're not really sure what to do, then obviously we are here to help with that as well. But I'm just conscious that we have got 10 minutes left actually, so if anybody's got any more questions then they can put them in the chat, but I do think it's kind of coming to a natural end. The questions have stopped. So the first thing I want to say is if you could please leave some feedback. I'm going to put the link into the chat now, and would be very grateful if you could just fill that in. It does only take a minute or so, if that. Also, if you've got any ideas about other things that you'd like to see. But in the meantime, we're just going to hang back and see if anybody else has got any questions, or if you want to wait until everybody else is gone, you can stay back and ask them then.
I'm gonna give you another scenario actually that is quite common.
Okay.
In the arena that we work in, and it's familiar relationships. We often have people who work within our place of work that might be mum and daughter, son and mum. We do have it, and I'll give you an example of something that I did. I actually promoted the daughter, and the mum and daughter worked together. And I made it very clear to the daughter in her new role that she didn't call her mum mum. She had to address her mum by her first name in the workplace. And I didn't have any issues whatsoever with her daughter, but the mum didn't like that at all. And eventually we got over that barrier, and the next person we employed within that work environment, I actually asked them if they knew of a relationship that was familiar within the workplace, and they didn't. They didn't know, so it had worked. I'd made it very clear to the person that we'd actually moved forward into that role that she mustn't call them by their pet name or familial name. She had to call them by the name that they are known by everybody else. And that made it a fairer way of addressing. Sometimes it would slip, but usually in my company, in which case it was away from everybody else. So just be mindful of the fact, and I do know we've got a lot of relationships in business and in the workplaces that we work. And if you are in working in a doctor's surgery, it's quite common that in times gone by, we've often said, does anybody know somebody that fit this bill? We tend not to do that these days. We recruit fairly. But we do have an inherent familial team within some of the places that we work. But we need to address it. We can't ignore it. We can't just say that, okay, that's the right person for the role. But how are they going to behave? We need to educate them on behaviour. And a bit like Helen said about that leadership, I do think it is really important that when you progress within your roles, that you follow the leadership journey too. Really important that you are strengthened and that the people that put you in that role respect the fact that you need that leadership support to be able for you to achieve your objective and earn that respect. You'll learn and you'll find that very valuable in your journey.
If anybody would like to know anything more about that, then you can pop it on your feedback form and I can contact you afterwards if you want me to. So has anybody got anything else? Or Heather, do you want anything else to add?
No, I don't know. I'm good with scenarios if anybody's got one.
Yeah.
I doubt, Helen, I've reached a conclusion. Sorry.
Okay then. Right. Well, I'll just end the webinar then. I think if nobody else has got anything else to ask. Like I said, please take a moment to complete the feedback form, but I'm going to stop the recording now. If anybody wants to say anything after that, then that's fine. So let me work out how to do that.
Thanks, everybody. It's been a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.